Thank you, Jonas.
All right. I think we are good to go here. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening in Australia. Thank you very much, Nick, for joining us and sharing about circular economy. Let me just hand it over to you and we'll get this started.
Great, thank you. So welcome, everyone. I'm sort of happy to be part of your session here this week. To kick off your week, hopefully on a positive, good note. Let me just close the window here because I don't know if you guys hear, but there's some rain, so hang on. We've spent the last 10 to 12 days in Sydney with the most rain ever historically for the last 1,000 years, they reckon the meteorologists. So it's an indication of the climate crisis, many are saying. And we are bearing the brunt of it as the oldest continent in the world, as a continent. We're the oldest in the world from what they do say, and we're actually feeling the brunt of it here in Australia right now. So we've come to the end of our summer, entering autumn, and it's been an interesting summer. So I'm just conscious of time, let's get straight into it. Thanks for joining, and what we're going to cover off today is really going into sort of some deeper insights around circular economy with the circulist mindset. What we'll basically take you through is really looking at what it means to go deeper on what it is to sort of think about how we've gotten to this point, and then just present some optionality on where things are at right now and what we're doing at Circulist the World to try and solve for this big challenge. So, as I said, what we'll cover is the current economy, society, and the built world, the declining industrial paradigm, and what next. The circular economy, in our view, has two versions. There's one theoretical, but there are two narratives right now. The question is, which one will organisations focus on? There is a big new battleground called from the scale-ups versus the transformers, and the big question is who will win. We're going to present some of those examples here today. And we basically then will sort of present what we're doing at Circulist and how that's changing. So let's get straight into it. So I'm going to present some facts. The first fact is that by 2050, which is only less than 30 years away, 28 years away, humanity will need 3 times of the Earth's ecological resources to continue to consume as much as we do today. Today, we're actually already 1.6 times, which as I'm sure you would all appreciate, is unsustainable and is broken. That's the first fundamental fact. Things are getting worse as our population growth increases, as our consumption habits increase as well. The second important fact is that if we just focus on, Ellen MacArthur Foundation does this amazing work, and you'll find with here at the bottom of that URL on this slide, around what we need to do to try and solve for the climate crisis that we have existentially in our world right now. If we only just focused on the electrification of our world, right, which there is so much talk about, and sort of the zeitgeist, you would say, very much is around electrifying our world in everything that we do through our grids, our power generation, all the way through to consumption across mobility and built world and so forth. It will only basically solve for 50% of the climate crisis. The other close to 50% will actually need to be solved for with the way that we deal with our changing wasteful production and consumption behaviours. This is a big problem that we don't talk enough about, and it's something that we think needs a lot more attention. Another important fact, and this sort of represents my background. I've come from being 3 decades in the technology sector, and have seen the evolutionary shift of coming from the software sort of in a box world and hardware in a box world through to everything as a service, or shifting towards software as a service and hardware as a service across the board. And I'm sure some of you have experienced this as well. Now, recognizing the value that our subscription-based approach takes, there's a lot for us to learn. There's a lot for us that we could learn with regards to what the software technology sector has done in terms of subscription and value creation. And we can talk a bit about that later. So let's get straight into what does the industrial paradigm look like and how it's declining. You know, we've come from the agricultural revolution, the first revolution, where we saw very local ecologies and villages and towns and guilds close to streams and sort of the evolution of farms and horses and carriages for mobility, shifting towards an industrialized world where our view is that it's actually maturing, if not matured, and in a declining state, all because of our existential threats around overconsumption and excessive waste. And we're now shifting towards a sustainable circular-based approach where renewable energies and dematerialization and closed-loop systems are actually going towards becoming this major transformational shift in the world. Another important element here is that productivity as a whole, and I'm sure with a lot of you working with large multinational organizations, you know, we're trying to squeeze as much as we can across our process innovation and so forth, and through automation and RPA. We are actually at the point where the current industrial construct as an operating model is actually being challenged. There's only so much productivity we can drive where we can actually balance automation and human front level value and experience over time. What is increasing, as we all know, is automation in terms of work and purpose of work, and the big shift towards you know, soft skills and convergent innovation and team collaboration activities on the front line, where most of the jobs that are typically done that are much more redundant and repeatable are now being automated through robotic technologies, both in software and hardware. The other flip side of that is that it actually does expose excess management in the middle layer as an organization, in the way that organizations operate. And then there's a famous book by David Graeber. I don't know if any of you have actually heard of David Graeber. A few years ago in 2018, he published a book called The Bullshit Jobs. And it basically talks about meaningless jobs out there, thanks to the fact that our organizations from the middle going out are actually getting hollowed out. It's a great book to read. So productivity is being challenged. The other interesting reality is that, you know, the advertising sector and a love affair with brands, and Mad Men is a great example of what advertising and brand can do to the power of changing consumer behavior and falling in love with things over time, ultimately masquerades and disguises the issue around the growing waste challenges that it creates. We have so many products that we produce in market. They are designed for, you know, single use or designed with a assembly mindset, not a disassembly mindset. So products that are so well designed, they're so difficult to disassembly, therefore create the e-waste and the challenges that we have in the world. And we seem to be doing a great job in the developed world, you know, exporting our wasteful consumption habits to developing countries. And there's a whole discussion around that, which we won't go into today. But this is an important element, that increasing consumerism is actually driving existential waste, and it's a fundamental wicked problem that we need to deal with. And so with that in mind, I'm going to take you through a few slides here, just talking about the fundamental challenges that we need to try and tackle. We're basically running out of resources, yet we continue to create more waste. It is one of those crazy, wicked problems that is growing and getting worse and worse as our population grows, as our populations become much more city, urban oriented, and as we get more and more hundreds of millions of people into middle classes across Asia Pacific. Excuse me, just one moment.
Oh, so far so good, Nick. We already had, I think, 2 quick questions on the chat. Do you want to get to them now, just briefly?
Yeah, please.
So just to clarify, in the opening, you mentioned that we're using 1.6 world resources at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And Martin asks, how is that possible when we only have 1 times world resources?
No, but see, we are extracting from the earth. That's the point. So many more, and we continue to extract and depleting our forests and impacting our oceans. So it's actually, there's a great study. We should share the report and the calculation, Giannis, in the notes in the post. So
I'll make sure to do that. And then Donut from Switzerland asked, how does electrifying reduce the resource usage if we don't at the same time change our behaviors? And I understood you that that's exactly the problem you're getting to, right?
Correct. That is the fundamental problem. So our current zeitgeist at the moment, our momentum around, fixing the world is all around electrification. But if we don't shift our way and our operating models away from mega factories and global supply chains, which actually continue to produce our excessive consumption habits through the power of marketing and love affair with brands, and our wasteful approaches, we need to fundamentally tackle both at the same time. But we're currently on the trajectory of electrifying the world. Most technologies around electrification, apart from storage, which is improving, are there. It's about deploying impact capital to basically accelerate that. I heard a very interesting podcast today with regards to the industrial economy with an analyst from Goldman Sachs who was talking about over the next 30 years, we need to be deploying $2 trillion worth of capital towards electrifying the world in order for us to actually achieve climate crisis, which is quite amazing, quite extraordinary. $2 trillion worth of deployment of capital and execution. Now, the big question is, can we do that or not? That's a whole conversation, right? But it's just interesting the scale. The bigger challenge here is that all we're doing, from a productivity point of view, all we're doing is replacing combustion engine or fossil fuel-based capabilities with electrified capabilities. We're not actually driving reimagining production and service and experiences in that way of thinking, right? So, we're seeing that right now with organizations like Tesla and Rivian and the like. From my point of view, they are still operating in a linear mega factory executional model, even though they're deploying EV capabilities with a brand new brand, right? So we can talk about that at the end of Q&A if we want. So,
all right, we have a curious group here, Nick, but let's get back to you and what you had in store for us.
Okay, I'm just conscious of time as well, so maybe I'll skip through this really quickly and we can cover off.
There's time, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So as we know, the other interesting aspect, the enemy that we have is that convenience of buying products for the best price. From our point of view, is the enemy. What we realize is a lot of people, all they want is to have a reliable product to complete a task that is not harmful to the planet, right? The most important thing at the bottom is it's not harmful to the planet. And to complete the task, it's an important imperative on our part with our circulist mindset that they shouldn't have to buy, use, or dispose of products, right? Which comes back to the notion of responsibility. Who's responsible for these products? So at the core problem, industrialists, from our point of view, manufacturers across the board, who produce and sell products who are polluting the world for financial short-term profits only. And this is very evident in many large manufacturing organizations right now where, the system, in inverted commas, operates in a certain type of KPIs where the externalities of environmental and social impact, we know we're getting there, but are not being accelerated enough to actually change the way organizations operate at scale. A really good example is a linear iPhone journey example of the beautiful Apple iPhone, right? You take through this journey where it gets designed in Apple, in HQ at Cupertino, gets assembled at Foxconn, at Fox Coast locations. It gets shipped and warehoused globally at different junction points. It then gets sold at many hundreds of stores direct to consumer through their own branded retail experience locations, or if not thousands and tens of thousands of other retailers globally and online. You buy the product, being the iPhone, you use it, you then dispose of it, either you trade it in or you sort of give it away, or you just completely, you might trade it in now as an approach. Apple has these two Daisy disassembly robots, and they are able to now disassemble their proprietary designed appliances, being the iPhone, a few hundred at an hour right now. And they're extracting the raw materials. And then the big question is, what happens next? Now, for an organization even like Apple, it's actually amazing that they're on this journey right now. There's a whole discussion we can spend on just understanding what they're doing as an organization. Funny enough, I actually wrote a perspectives post on our circulist.com website, breaking out how we believe Apple is becoming a circulist organization over the next 20 years. So you could check that out, and we'll probably share it in the notes as well. So what does it mean to have a circular economy? Well, I'm assuming that most people understand what it is on this sort of core, but for the ones that don't, this is coming out of our circulist imperative white paper that we published in December of last year, only a couple of months ago. And, very much going from a linear take, make, waste approach in an operating model, where waste seems to sort of disappear and it becomes non-valuable and non-existent. Materials are now put at the center and are actually put through a system where we design, produce, distribute, consume, reuse and repair, and continuously try and maintain value of both the product and the materials and the parts for as long as we can in a local for local environment. So it's something that the circular economy is sort of being spoken about as sort of the next big frontier in terms of what we need to do to basically save humanity on the planet, not the planet itself. The planet will continue without humans. It's just about us sustaining ourselves on this planet. And we have to fundamentally shift to a circular economy approach. Now, with that in mind, and based on many years of observing what's been happening in markets, our observations are that there are two versions of the circular economy. And it's never really spoken about this way. Theoretically, it's spoken about as one circular economy, but in reality, we have two versions. The first version is where we are trying, version one is where we try and tackle the symptoms of the linear economy challenges, which are waste, recycling, right to repair, extended product life. And we have organizations that try and tackle those problems and try and solve for them. So for waste, for recycling and extended product life, right? And these are great problem areas that we need to try and tackle in order to solve the climate crisis and dematerialization. But if we only just focused on this, and governments are attracted to solving for this right now because of the large global, slow-moving industrial economy that we have, we will all be doing is just kicking the problem down the road by many decades. And so our observation is that we need to deploy circular economy version 2. And our belief is that we need to design a future where the economy is driven by products as a service, designed for disassembly, and recycling and remaking are actually incorporating the overall arching operating model through sustainable energy usage and consumption, right? Ultimately eliminating waste. And so the mindset very much is a way of shifting away from product centricity to material centricity. Here are some examples of organizations in a circular economy version 1's construct. Great Wrap is a great Australian organization, a startup that's becoming a scale-up now, that's all fundamentally solved how to basically do reimagining plastics with compostable plastic, sort of compostable material that they've been able to invent with some partnership with one of the universities here in Australia. And they are basically taking the extracts of potato peels and turning them into this product that we see here on the left for wrapping. And it's an amazing success story here at the moment. They're basically planning to enter the US market sometime soon and also solve the problem for the wrapping that goes around our delivery of a lot of boxes and so forth on a grander scale. Redwood Materials is another amazing unicorn that's actually kicked off. These two organizations, Redwood Materials and Back Market, have hit unicorn status. They're the first circular economy sort of new scale-up type of ventures that are coming through, where Redwood Materials actually was founded by the co-founder of Tesla, J.B. Strausbell, who has gone off to now focus on basically building a new operating model around and solving the big problem of battery recycling across the EV area. And he's doing an amazing job, and they're growing. But they're still only focusing on dealing with the symptom being the material recycling that's required. The last one is Back Market, a French-based unicorn, which focuses on, they built one of the world's leading marketplaces online for buying used smartphones and consumer devices, and growing ever so fast around the world right now, and doing a great job to testing, verifying used smartphones, iPads, and consumer electronics, and making them available again to the public market in a very thorough QA process that they have. So from our point of view, these are very much version 1 type of companies and ventures. Version 2 are these ones where SpaceX, Arrival, and Fairphone. I'm sure some of you may have heard of Fairphone and possibly Arrival. I'm sure SpaceX as well. But for many, these are organizations that are trying to reimagine the operating model at its core and focusing on bringing value back to the materials and extending the life of the materials and pushing production and service capabilities to the edge, city by cities around the world, especially Arrival and Fairphone. SpaceX clearly has US presence still and predominantly will stay there the way that they're operating. But if you just look at the image right now, where on the left-hand side with the 2 rocket boosters, this is a very, very important moment in space industry, actually, that people may or may not realize. But, you know, when these 2 rocket boosters came and landed back, it was a very important pivotal moment in time because of the fact they were able to recycle and reuse and those rocket boosters again. As many of you would be aware, rocket boosters, once they're out into the stratosphere, it's gone. It might get burnt or land back in somewhere in the ocean somewhere, and it's dead and it can never be used. So really, SpaceX brought sort of circular economy executional capabilities to the space industry. And Arrival, for me, I'm sort of in love with Arrival as an organization. I won't go into too much about them, but they are looking at reimagining electric buses and electric courier vans by building distributed network of micro factories around the world. Excuse me. You know, there are also large incumbents out there, like our interfaces, Signify, which is the old Philips commercial lighting business, and Rolls-Royce, that are transforming their businesses towards everything as a service, responsibility at the heart of what they do, you know, circularity applied to their design thinking across their products, and tracking and measuring usage of their products across the network, and delivering value accordingly by improving the products as they build better versions of those products over time. These are 3 exemplary organizations in 3 different areas that I'm sort of fascinated by and strongly believe they're executing a circular economy version. They're on the pathway to circular economy version 2. So, you know, we need to sort of close that off and say, let's say goodbye to the industrialists and say hello to circulist. And circulist is our brand. And we basically, we're trying to use language, or reuse of language, or inventing language or words, so that we can start shifting away certain type of language and words that get used, and actually which remind us and probably bring to us negative connotations of things that happen in the real world, and trying to bring positive statements with new words and languages that we're producing. And circulist is the start of that. Our mission is to reimagine products for good. We're basically we're building a tomorrow where products are made to be used rather than thrown away. And who are we trying to serve? The core market is the conscious customers, predominantly consumers and businesses out there who actually want to do good, not just on the side, you know, as an option, but just to be incorporated in their everyday life. And that's an important criteria. And it's a growing market. And it's sort of, I think there's a very, very strong undercurrent of a lot of people in the world that if they knew that they were doing good every day in their life by not changing their habits, then that's a massive opportunity. We have, on that note, we have 5 levels of the circulist advancement, and we strongly believe this is going to take decades. Many of you work in large sort of multinational organizations where things take a long time to execute and roll out. Some of these messages that we're sharing here are really the circulist mindset. I strongly believe are going to be we'll achieve success above and beyond my lifetime, is how I see it. It's going to take a long time, but it's paramount. We have to do it. And what are the 5 levels? The 5 levels very much around applying circular intent to traditional manufacturing and production, tracking material usage across the complete product life cycle, and recycling activities implemented. Dematerialization is at the core of what we're talking about. Applied through circular design and executing under a products as a service operating model. Shifting towards away from mega factories and global supply chains to building a distributed network of local assembly, micro factory assembly service centers is at the core of what we believe needs to happen to reshift the way that we do things. And then building a completely intelligent operating model that's powered by a decentralized approach is the ultimate frontier.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
Did we just make it, or do you still have 50 slides for us?
No, I might just finish up. Just a couple more slides and we're done. So
we just on the nose here.
Okay. So basically, our growing tribe, and there are 3 things that we think are important. The first important is that customers should not need to own products. The second is they should not be responsible for product repair and maintenance. And the last is creating products that are designed to become waste is just wrong. So on that note, I'd like to close off and
that's amazing.
And stop sharing. So
thank you very much, Nick. We made it just on time.
Great.
Gurdeep, you're with an insurance firm. You asked a question a couple of minutes back.
Yeah, probably that's more from a service industry, because most of the things that we see over here are from manufacturing. But then question comes around, how does it impact on the service industry? And at the same time, the e-waste getting generated from service industry in the form of carbon emissions and carbon footprints. So that's another question, that is that in the roadmap, or how can we look into that aspect?
Sorry, what was your name? Sorry.
It's Gurdeep.
Oh, Gurdeep, yeah. What was, when you talk about service, can you please define service?
This can be more like IT services providers or software builders or app builders and all that stuff, which is more on the internet and not on the physical world. And then looking at the carbon emission because of that. Yeah,
look, I mean, the reality is that very much from an IT services perspective, really the value to be created here from a circular approach and shifting towards this is actually the underlying infrastructure enabling these cloud services, right, at the core, which again goes back to hardware and the materials that are actually operating that hardware and powering that hardware and services so that they are as green and circular as possible, right? So so that's sort of the overarching answer there. I haven't really covered the question that well, but services are enabled through underlying technology infrastructure, and it's the technology infrastructure that needs to be reimagined in terms of how it executes. So and the way we're going, as we know, I've spent the last 30 years in the tech sector. We're shifting away from our Web 2.0 architecture to a Web 3.0 architecture with distributed architectures now pushing technologies back onto the edge away from centralization, right? So it will be interesting to see, what does that mean? Does that mean that we're going to have a plethora of more hardware out there, miniature, therefore creating more waste, right? Shifting away from centralization where it can be controlled. So that's a big question. I think that's where the opportunities lie for anybody looking at Web3 and distributed network service capabilities to actually deploy cloud solutions that are enabled on the edge with devices and appliances that actually are, tracked and measured in real time for how they're being used, and also over time delivered as a service as themselves. I mean, I don't want to be talking about brands or vendors, but HP's got a very interesting program called the Green Lake program, right? Which seems to be phenomenal in terms of how they're focusing on things. So where they're completely responsible for the infrastructure and the hardware to deliver services, right? So, and in no way, shape, or form are you responsible to own the infrastructure anymore, right? So.
Hey Nick, quick question from me, if that's okay, Jonas. Have we got time?
Yeah, all right. Going in the bonus round here.
Thank you. What's the first step? Like, I think about our business and you know, some of these businesses. What's kind of like the first step that you would suggest to people to kind of at least get started? Like, what?
Okay. So funny, great question, Sam. So we're currently going down the pathway of actually building a transition. That's what we're calling the circulist transition tool. And the transition tool is a self-assessment tool that will take you through the journey of looking at the different areas across your organization and coming out with a particular score of where you're at in the journey to becoming a circulist. So we share more information about that when we do launch it, but there needs to be some form of assessment of where an organization's at to start with, accepting that situation, right? Firstly, which is always the hard part for many organizations to accept that's where they're at. And then the next step from that is to try and deploy, as part of their transformation activities, 3 to 5 key initiatives to get them onto the journey around shifting away from centralized sort of manufacturing and production, or if they're a product brand building products in market, how do they start designing in with circularity at their front and center? So we're looking at driving initiatives with certain type of product brands in market later in the year, which will actually help them think about what does it mean to, you know, deploy and build and design products with disassembly at the core, right? As an example, versus assembly at the core. It's how do you design for disassembly as a core principle? Because without having disassembly as the core design principle in the design and engineering phase, you're ultimately going to create waste because it can't be broken down as the products are sold around the world and used, right? So just one simple example. So we've got 48 capabilities that we use through this transition tool that we're building, and it'll basically present an analysis of that as a starting point. So.
Thank you, Nick. I think that's all for this time. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Eye-opening. I took quite some notes here. Look forward also to seeing your slides and definitely to continuing the conversation.
Great.
Thank you.